The funny thing about a locked gate is that it never lies. People do. The metallic click echoed across the lake before the first angry voice reached me. My thumb was still resting on the control remote as the steel barrier slid into place, slow and deliberate, cutting off the only paved road leading to 17 luxury lake houses. The smell of fresh-cut pine mixed with damp asphalt lingered in the cool morning air, and somewhere beyond the trees, an osprey cried over the water like it had witnessed this moment coming long before any of us had. Behind the gate, a line of luxury SUVs began stacking up. A black Escalade, 2 Range Rovers, a pearl-white Mercedes wagon. Their engines idled impatiently while keycards flashed angry red against the reader. Access suspended. The words glowed brighter than the sunrise. By the time the first fist slammed against the steel gate, my phone had already started vibrating. One call after another. Homeowners, realtors, contractors. Someone screamed that families were trapped. Another threatened to sue me before breakfast. I silenced every call without looking at the screen. Because 24 hours earlier, those same people had watched their HOA president push my repair invoice back across a polished conference table like it was junk mail. $63,500. That number hadn't been pulled from thin air. It came from broken bridge beams, collapsed drainage culverts, twisted guardrails, and 48 pages of engineering estimates sitting neatly inside a blue binder that still smelled faintly of printer toner. Meredith Caldwell never opened it. She simply smiled. "If this road serves everyone," she said, folding her perfectly manicured hands together, "maintaining it should be considered your contribution to the community." Contribution. I can still hear the way she stretched that word, soft as silk and twice as poisonous. The room smelled like expensive perfume and freshly brewed coffee. Around the conference table, half the board members avoided eye contact while the others nodded along like bobbleheads in designer polo shirts. Through the clubhouse windows, the lake shimmered peacefully, pretending none of this ugliness existed. I picked up my binder without saying another word. Meredith mistook my silence for surrender. That was her first mistake. My name is Caleb Whitaker. I'm 42 years old, born and raised in northern Michigan, and I've spent more than 2 decades building roads, repairing bridges, and solving drainage failures that most people never notice until everything washes away. My father taught me something before I ever learned how to drive. Concrete remembers every shortcut. Turns out paperwork does too. The road behind that gate isn't part of the subdivision. It isn't HOA property. It isn't county property. It's Whitaker Pass. My grandfather blasted the first path through these woods with borrowed equipment in 1968, carving a narrow route toward the lake long before anyone imagined million-dollar vacation homes would stand where cedar trees once grew. Every culvert, every retaining wall, every timber bridge had been maintained by my family ever since. Quietly, without headlines, without applause. Most of the people living beyond that gate never knew its history. They only saw a smooth road leading to waterfront sunsets. They never wondered who repaired it after spring floods, who replaced rotting bridge planks after harsh winters, who cleared fallen trees before dawn so emergency vehicles could get through. They assumed roads simply existed. Meredith assumed something even more dangerous. She assumed that because everyone depended on Whitaker Pass, no one would ever dare close it. What she didn't know was that the deed locked inside my truck contained one sentence that would change every life on that lakeshore before the week was over. My father never believed in sentimental speeches. He believed in grease under your fingernails, survey stakes that stood perfectly straight, and paperwork signed before the first shovel touched the ground. When I was 10 years old, he walked me across Whitaker Pass carrying nothing but a framing hammer and a thermos of black coffee. The gravel crunched beneath our boots. Morning mist drifted above the lake, and the scent of cedar mixed with damp earth after a night of steady rain. He stopped beside the old timber bridge and rested one weathered hand on the guardrail. "This road doesn't belong to the loudest man," he told me. "It belongs to the one willing to take care of it." At the time, I thought he was talking about fixing potholes. Years later, I realized he was talking about responsibility. Whitaker Pass wasn't just another private road hidden in northern Michigan's woods. It was nearly 1.5 miles of engineered drainage, reinforced culverts, retaining walls, and one timber bridge crossing a narrow stream before reaching Pine Hollow Lake. My grandfather carved the original trail through dense forest in 1968 using borrowed bulldozers and more determination than money. My father spent 30 years improving it one project at a time, never borrowing beyond what he could repay, never cutting corners simply because nobody was watching. By the time he passed away, every inch of that road carried a memory. The bridge where he taught me how to inspect cracked beams after spring thaw. The drainage ditch we rebuilt together during a thunderstorm that soaked us both to the bone. The granite retaining wall where he'd carved a tiny W behind one loose stone, laughing that only a Whitaker would ever know it was there. When ownership transferred to me, people assumed I had inherited valuable lake access. They were wrong. I inherited maintenance. Every fallen tree became my problem. Every washout after heavy rain carried my name. Every snowstorm meant climbing into my old loader before sunrise while everyone beyond the gate stayed warm inside million-dollar vacation homes. Most residents never even knew who cleared the road. They simply expected it to be open. For 22 years I worked as a civil contractor specializing in bridges and rural access roads across northern Michigan. I repaired county crossings after floods, stabilized collapsing embankments, and rebuilt washed-out culverts most people drove across without giving them a second thought. Steel, concrete, drainage, load ratings, those weren't just part of my job. They were a language. You learn something working around infrastructure. Nothing fails overnight. Every collapse starts with someone ignoring a warning. That truth came back to haunt Pine Hollow Lake. About 5 years before everything exploded, Meredith Caldwell and her husband bought one of the largest waterfront homes in the community. Within 18 months, she was HOA president. Within another year, she acted like she owned the entire shoreline. She drove a pearl-white Range Rover that somehow always looked freshly detailed. Her expensive perfume lingered several seconds after she walked away, almost strong enough to hide the scent of entitlement that followed her everywhere. She loved using words like community standards, neighborhood improvements, and shared responsibility. Funny how those words always seem to cost everyone else money. At first, Meredith treated me like the helpful contractor who happened to own the access road. Then she started treating Whitaker Pass like HOA property. Decorators arrived without asking. Landscaping crews parked heavy equipment wherever they pleased. Delivery trucks ignored the bridge's clearly posted weight limit. Each time I politely reminded them that this was private infrastructure, Meredith smiled, as though I were a child misunderstanding grown-up business. "Don't worry, Caleb," she'd say. "We're making the neighborhood better for everyone." I noticed something else during those months. Every improvement she announced somehow made the lake houses more valuable. Every shortcut she approved pushed more wear onto the one road she didn't own. And every time another overloaded truck rumbled across my bridge, I could almost hear my father's voice again. Every collapse starts with someone ignoring a warning. Meredith Caldwell never raised her voice when she wanted to threaten someone. That was the first thing I learned about her. She didn't slam doors. She didn't pound tables. She didn't curse in public. She smiled, lowered her chin just enough to look concerned, and wrapped every insult in velvet until people thanked her for cutting them. The first rail warning came on a Friday afternoon in late April. I was replacing a damaged reflector post near the bend before the bridge when I heard tires whisper across the gravel behind me. Not crunch, whisper. Expensive tires on a vehicle too polished for a work road. I looked up and saw Meredith's white Range Rover ease to a stop beside my truck. The window glided down. "Caleb," she said, like my name was something stuck to her shoe. "We need to discuss the appearance of this entrance." I wiped road dust from my hands with a rag and glanced at the old cedar sign nailed between two posts. "Private road. Licensed access only. Weight limit 12,000 pounds. It's clear," I said. "That's the important part." Her smile didn't move, but her eyes hardened. "The board feels it gives visitors the wrong impression. Pine Hollow Lake is becoming a premium waterfront community. That sign feels hostile." Hostile. I looked past her toward the bridge, where spring water hissed beneath the timber beams. That sign had been there since my father installed it after a logging truck cracked 2 planks in 1999. It wasn't decoration. It was a warning. "Heavy trucks need to see it," I said. "The board is considering a more welcoming stone monument," she replied. "Something tasteful, perhaps with the Pine Hollow Lake name." I laughed once before I could stop myself. That was my mistake. Meredith's fingers tightened around the steering wheel, knuckles pale against tan leather. You may technically own the road, she said softly, but let's not pretend it only serves you. There it was. Technically. The word hung between us like the smell of hot brakes. Over the next month, the pressure changed shape. First came polite emails, then board notices, then vendors arriving with instructions I never approved. A landscaping crew planted ornamental grasses along my drainage ditch and blocked half the flow with decorative river stones. A sign company showed up with plans for a bronze Pine Hollow Lake entrance plaque. A security contractor asked where I wanted the camera poles installed. I sent them all away. Each time, Meredith acted shocked. Caleb is being difficult, she wrote in the community newsletter. Our board is working hard to improve shared access, but certain outdated attitudes continue slowing progress. Certain outdated attitudes. That meant me. By June, neighbors who had barely waved for years suddenly had opinions. A man in a golf visor told me my road looked rustic in a bad way. A woman walking two tiny dogs asked whether I understood property values. One homeowner suggested I donate Whitaker Pass to the HOA and let professionals manage it. I almost asked him where those professionals had been during the January ice storm when I spent 6 hours clearing fallen pine limbs while his fireplace smoke curled peacefully above the trees. Instead, I kept records, photos of blocked ditches, copies of emails, license plates from contractors, dates, times, names. Because my father taught me another thing. When someone starts rewriting reality, write everything down first. The final insult came at the July board meeting. Meredith stood in front of 50 lake residents with a slideshow titled Modernizing Our Community Gateway. On the screen was a rendering of my road entrance stripped of my warning signs, framed by stone pillars, flower beds, and a polished arch reading Pine Hollow Lake Estates. People clapped. I sat in the back row and felt the room tilt slightly. Then Meredith looked straight at me and said, "Some owners struggle to understand that progress benefits everyone." That's when I knew she wasn't asking anymore. She was preparing to take. The bridge finally gave its warning on a Wednesday morning. Not a dramatic collapse. Not the kind you see on the evening news. Just a deep wooden crack beneath 40,000 pounds of steel. I heard it before I saw the truck. The diesel engine echoed through the pines, followed by the familiar rattle of overloaded suspension. The smell of hot brakes drifted across the stream while I was replacing a drainage grate 50 yards away. My stomach tightened before I even turned around. A triaxle dump truck painted with the logo of North Ridge Landscaping rolled toward Whitaker Bridge carrying massive granite boulders for another one of Meredith's waterfront beautification projects. The yellow weight limit sign stood directly beside the entrance. 12,000 pounds maximum. The driver never slowed down. Neither did the foreman riding shotgun. I waved both arms and shouted before the truck reached the bridge. "Stop. You're overloaded." The driver glanced at me through the windshield, hesitated for half a second, then pointed toward another vehicle parked farther ahead. Meredith's white Range Rover. She stood beside the road wearing sunglasses and holding a clipboard. Instead of signaling him to stop, she waved him forward. The first axle rolled onto the timber deck, then the second. By the time the rear wheels reached the center span, the bridge groaned so loudly that birds exploded from the nearby trees. A sharp cracking sound echoed beneath the planks. One support beam twisted just enough for me to see fresh splinters burst from the weathered wood. The truck reached the opposite side safely. Barely, but the damage was done. I climbed underneath the bridge immediately. Fresh cracks spread along two load-bearing beams. One steel connection plate had shifted nearly half an inch. Even worse, the overloaded vibration had crushed part of the drainage culvert supporting the east approach. Water already flowed around the damaged pipe instead of through it. One heavy rainstorm. That's all it would take. The road wouldn't wash away overnight. It would begin disappearing 1 inch at a time. I photographed everything. Every crack. Every tire mark. Every broken timber. The truck's DOT number. The driver's face. Meredith standing beside the crossing. Then I walked over while the landscaping crew unloaded boulders near the shoreline. You ignored the posted limit. Meredith didn't even look up from her clipboard. We had a schedule. You just damaged a private bridge. It survived. For now. She finally lowered her sunglasses. Caleb, infrastructure wears out. That's what maintenance is for. Maintenance. She said it like the bridge had simply grown old by coincidence, not because she'd ordered a truck weighing more than 3 times the legal limit across it. That afternoon, I hired an independent structural engineer named Thomas Garrison, a man I'd worked with on county bridge inspections for nearly 15 years. Tom carried a flashlight, a moisture meter, and absolutely no patience for shortcuts. He spent almost 3 hours underneath Whitaker Bridge. When he climbed back out, his jeans were covered with mud and sawdust. His expression told me everything before he spoke. This crossing should be closed until repairs are complete. My chest tightened. How bad? Worse than it looks. He tapped one cracked beam with the handle of his hammer. Hundreds of thousands of loading cycles left in this bridge yesterday. Another tap. Now? I'd trust a pickup. He wouldn't trust another commercial truck. The engineering report arrived 48 hours later. Bridge stabilization, timber replacement, drainage reconstruction, approach grading, emergency erosion control. Total estimated repair cost, $63,500. Every dollar documented. Every calculation supported. Every photograph attached. I assembled everything into a thick blue binder and sent a formal demand letter to Pine Hollow Lake Association requesting reimbursement within 15 business days. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't even looking for an apology. I simply wanted the people who caused the damage to pay for fixing it. Looking back now, I almost laugh at how reasonable that sounded. Because while I was carefully documenting structural failures, Meredith Caldwell was already planning how to make me pay for all of them instead. The certified letter arrived on a Monday, thick enough to feel dangerous before I even opened it. It was waiting inside my mailbox beside a grocery flyer and a water bill, cream-colored envelope, embossed HOA seal, Meredith Caldwell's name typed beneath the return address like a warning label. The paper smelled faintly of toner and perfume, which told me she had probably handled it herself. I slid it open with my pocket knife. By the second paragraph, my jaw had gone tight. Pine Hollow Lake Association formally denied responsibility for the bridge damage. According to Meredith, the truck had used a community access route under long-standing, shared usage expectations. The bridge failure, she claimed, resulted from deferred private maintenance and owner neglect. Owner neglect. I read those 2 words 3 times while the wind moved through the pines behind me. Then I reached the last page. A. Violation notice. $500 per day for failure to maintain safe community infrastructure. Starting immediately. I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. They had overloaded my bridge, cracked my beams, crushed my culvert, refused the repair bill, then fined me because the thing they broke was broken. That takes a special kind of arrogance. I drove straight to the clubhouse with the blue binder on the passenger seat. Every red light felt longer than it should. My hand stayed calm on the wheel, but I could feel my pulse ticking in my throat like a hammer against pipe. The monthly HOA meeting had already started when I walked in. The room smelled like burnt coffee, lemon cleaner, and money pretending to be manners. Meredith sat at the head of the table in a cream blazer, silver pen in hand, surrounded by board members who looked more nervous than important. I set the binder in front of her. It landed with a heavy slap. "That's the engineering report," I said. "You received the invoice. You have the photos. Your contractor crossed a posted weight limit bridge after being warned." Meredith barely glanced at it. "Caleb, we've reviewed your claims." "No, you reviewed your escape route." Someone at the far end of the table coughed into their fist. Meredith's smile sharpened. "The association will not be bullied by inflated repair estimates." "It's not inflated." "Then perhaps you should have maintained your road properly." My fingers pressed against the back of a chair until the wood creaked. For 1 second, I pictured my father standing there instead of me. Saw his work boots, his cracked hands, his quiet eyes taking in the polished table and the people who'd never replaced a culvert in freezing rain. I let go of the chair. "Pay the bill," I said. Meredith folded her hands. "No, just that. One clean little word." Then she added the sentence that sealed everything. "If access is interrupted for any reason, our attorneys will pursue damages against you personally." There it was. The threat. Not loud, not sloppy, printed in her voice like letterhead. The next morning, her newsletter hit every inbox around the lake. She called me unstable, obstructionist, a disgruntled private owner attempting to hold the community hostage over routine maintenance costs. By noon, Homeowners were parked at my gate shouting through the bars. One man filmed himself calling me a thief. A woman in tennis whites told me her grandchildren had a right to enjoy the lake. Another guy slapped my warning sign hard enough to bend one corner. I stood on my porch and watched them perform outrage for their phones. Then my security camera pinged. The footage from the day of the damage had finished uploading to the cloud. Meredith, clear as glass, standing beside the bridge. The driver hesitating. My arms waving. Her hand lifting, waving him forward. I watched it twice. Then I went inside, pulled my father's old deed box from the closet, and opened the folder marked Whitaker Pass, access terms. The paper inside was yellowed at the edges, but the ink was still perfectly sharp. Old paper has a smell all its own. Dust, dry cardboard, faint machine oil from a filing cabinet that hasn't been opened in years. When I lifted the lid off my father's steel deed box, that smell carried me back to evenings at our kitchen table, where legal descriptions and survey maps were treated with the same respect as family photographs. Dad always believed memories faded, but recorded property rights didn't. The folder labeled Whitaker Pass. Access terms was thicker than I remembered. Inside were warranty deeds, easement agreements, survey plats, handwritten maintenance logs, county correspondence dating back decades, and one document folded neatly inside a clear protective sleeve. I unfolded it carefully. The paper had yellowed with age, but every word remained perfectly legible. The agreement had been signed in 1987, when the first lakeside subdivision was approved. Back then there were only 6 cabins around Pine Hollow Lake, and my father had agreed to grant a limited easement across Whitaker Pass so homeowners could reach the shoreline. Limited. That single word suddenly mattered more than it ever had before. I sat down at the workbench beneath the hanging shop light and began reading every paragraph, every footnote, every amendment that had been added over. Nearly 40 years. Outside, rain tapped softly against the metal roof. Inside, only the sound of turning paper broke the silence. The easement did not transfer ownership. It never had. It granted licensed access over a privately maintained road under specific conditions. The homeowners could cross it. They could not control it. They could benefit from it. They were never entitled to damage it. Then I reached Section 8. I stopped reading. Then I read it again. My pulse slowed instead of quickening. Whenever structural damage or unsafe conditions materially affected the roadway or bridge, the owner retained full authority to suspend access temporarily until repairs, inspections, or safety certification had been completed. There it was. Not hidden. Not complicated. One paragraph. 3 sentences. Signed by every original property owner. Recorded with the county. Completely enforceable. My father hadn't built a trap. He'd built a safety valve. I spread the remaining documents across the table. The original engineering drawings. Annual inspection reports. Receipts for bridge repairs going back almost 30 years. Every invoice paid by my family. Not a single reimbursement from the HOA. Not one. Then another detail caught my eye. A later amendment from 2008. Commercial vehicles exceeding posted weight restrictions automatically suspended the association's unrestricted access privileges until all resulting damage had been professionally evaluated and corrected. I leaned back in my chair. Meredith hadn't simply ignored the rules. She had violated the exact agreement that allowed the community to use Whitaker Pass in the first place. My phone buzzed. It was Tom Garrison. "I've finished the final inspection notes," he said. "What did you find?" "The bridge is worse after this week's rain." I closed my eyes. Bad enough to close? I wouldn't hesitate. He paused. "Caleb, if someone gets hurt crossing that bridge now, every attorney involved is going to ask why you knowingly left it open." That sentence settled everything. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was liability. If I ignored the damage because the HOA wanted convenience, I could lose everything my family had. Spent generations protecting. I thanked Tom and hung up. Then I drove into town. Not to a lawyer. Not yet. First I visited the county records office. The clerk recognized my last name before I introduced myself. She retrieved certified copies of every recorded easement, every amendment, every plat map tied to Whitaker Pass. Nothing had been altered. Nothing had expired. The access agreement Meredith kept referring to was exactly the one she had violated. Next, I stopped by the engineering office to collect Tom's signed structural assessment. Unsafe for continued unrestricted traffic. Those 5 words carried more weight than every speech Meredith had ever made. Driving home, I noticed another overloaded landscaping truck entering the subdivision. It slowed briefly at the bridge, then crossed anyway, like the warning signs didn't exist, like the rules belonged to someone else. I pulled over and watched until it disappeared beyond the trees. For the first time since this whole mess had started, I wasn't angry. Anger rushes. Preparation is quiet. Back in my workshop, I opened a fresh legal pad and wrote 3 names across the top of the page. County Inspector, Structural Engineer, Sheriff's Office. Meredith thought the next move would be another argument. She had no idea my next conversation wouldn't be with her at all. Preparation has a different sound than anger. Anger slams doors. Preparation clicks ballpoint pens, stacks documents by date, and waits until every signature sits exactly where it belongs. By sunrise the next morning, my kitchen table looked like a legal office had exploded across it. Certified easements, bridge photographs, Tom Garrison's structural report, email printouts, contractor license plates, screenshots from Meredith's newsletter. The video of her waving that overloaded truck across my bridge sat on a thumb drive beside my coffee mug. Black coffee, no sugar. My father would have approved. The rain had stopped before dawn, leaving Whitaker Pass slick and dark beneath the pines. Water hissed through the damaged culvert in a way I didn't like, too sharp, too fast, chewing at the soil beneath the east approach. Every few minutes, I heard loose gravel tumble into the ditch. That sound made the decision easier. At 8:03 a.m., I called the county road and bridge office. By 10:15, Inspector Brennan was standing beside me under Whitaker Bridge, hard hat tilted back, flashlight cutting across the cracked beams. Law was the kind of man who didn't waste words. Gray mustache, muddy boots, clipboard held like a judge's gavel. He tapped the shifted connection plate with his pen. Who crossed this overweight? I handed him the photograph. His mouth flattened. That's not close to 12,000 pounds. No. He looked toward the lake houses hidden through the trees. HOA project? HOA president waved it through. I gave him the thumb drive. He didn't smile. Good inspectors don't smile when infrastructure has been abused. They get quiet. By noon, he had written a preliminary field notice recommending immediate restricted access pending repair. Not a suggestion. Not a neighborly opinion. A county safety notice with his badge number printed at the bottom. Then I called the sheriff's office. Deputy Nathan Brooks arrived 20 minutes later, dust on his cruiser tires, one hand resting casually near his belt. He listened while I explained the easement. He read Section 8 twice. Then he read the 2008 Commercial Vehicle Amendment and looked up at me. So you can suspend access if the bridge is unsafe. Temporarily, I said, until repairs are completed and certified. And they refused to pay? I handed him Meredith's denial letter. He whistled under his breath. That's bold. That's one word for it. The last call went to an attorney in Traverse City named Ellen Voss, a woman who specialized in property disputes and had once made a developer cry during a deposition. I sent her the documents by email. She called back 40 minutes later. Caleb, she said, do not argue with them anymore. I wasn't planning to. Good. Send formal notice today. Certified mail, email, and physical posting at the gate. Cite unsafe condition, recorded easement language, and county inspection. Give them 24 hours before suspension. 24. You're being generous. So that's what I did. At 4 p.m. I posted the notice on the gate in a clear plastic sleeve. Temporary access suspension effective 6 a.m. tomorrow. Unsafe bridge condition. Repairs required prior to reopening. The paper snapped in the wind like a small white flag that wasn't surrendering. Within 15 minutes, Meredith called. I let it go to voicemail. Then came texts, emails, a message from the HOA attorney threatening emergency injunctions. Ellen answered that one herself. At 5:37 p.m., Meredith drove up in her Range Rover, tires spitting wet gravel. She marched to the gate, heels sinking into mud, perfume fighting a losing battle against pine sap and rainwater. You have no authority to do this, she snapped. I stood on my side of the gate with my hands in my jacket pockets. Actually, I said, that's the only thing I do have. Her face tightened. You'll destroy property values. No, you damaged a bridge. This is retaliation. No, this is documentation. For the first time since I'd known her, Meredith had nothing polished to say. Behind her, The lake road stretched quiet and dark, every warning sign suddenly looking less decorative than before. At 6 o'clock the next morning, I entered the new code. The gate motor hummed. The steel arm lowered. And Pine Hollow Lake learned the difference between access and ownership. At exactly 6:01 that morning, the first horn shattered the silence over Pine Hollow Lake. Then came another, and another. The sound bounced across the water in uneven bursts, echoing off the tree line while fog still drifted over the shoreline. I stood on my porch with a mug of coffee warming my hands and watched brake lights multiply beyond the gate like a string of red Christmas lights someone had forgotten to turn off after winter. The steel barrier hadn't failed. It had simply done exactly what it had been instructed to do. Remain closed. Within 15 minutes, Whitaker Pass looked like the entrance to a sold-out concert. Luxury SUVs sat bumper to bumper behind the lowered gate. Delivery vans idled impatiently. A landscaping trailer blocked half the shoulder. Someone in a base boat honked as though that might somehow convince steel to ignore electricity. The gate motor remained perfectly silent. At 6:24, Meredith arrived. Her white Range Rover stopped so abruptly that gravel sprayed against the guardrail. She climbed out without bothering to close her driver's door and marched toward the keypad, stabbing her access card against the reader over and over. Red light. Beep. Access suspended. Red light. Beep. Access suspended. Her jaw tightened with every failed attempt. Then she spotted me standing 50 yards away. "This is illegal," she shouted. Her voice carried farther than I'd ever heard it before. I walked toward the gate, stopping several feet inside my property line. "No," I answered calmly. "It's temporary. You've trapped homeowners. I've protected an unsafe bridge." People had started gathering behind her now. A retired dentist. A real estate agent. 2 vacation renters still wearing fishing jackets. Nobody looked angry at first. Mostly confused. Then the shouting began. "I've got contractors coming. My cleaning crew can't get through. We have buyers arriving at 9. That last voice caught my attention. I looked beyond the crowd and noticed 3 luxury sedans turning into the entrance, each displaying magnetic signs from a waterfront real estate company. Behind them rolled a catering truck and a florist van. Meredith had forgotten one tiny detail. Today was the grand showcase for 6 luxury lake houses she had been promoting all summer. Thousands of dollars in scheduled private tours. Photographers. Stagers. Prospective buyers. Everything depended on Whitaker Pass being open. By 7 o'clock, the line of vehicles stretched all the way to the county road. Then 2 sheriff's cruisers arrived. Deputy Nathan Brooks stepped out first. He didn't walk toward me. He walked straight to Meredith. She pointed furiously at the locked gate while waving a folder in the air. Nathan listened without interrupting. When she finally stopped talking, he opened the certified easement packet I had provided the previous afternoon. He read silently for nearly 2 minutes. Then he looked toward the bridge. "Has the county inspected it?" "Yes," I answered. He unfolded Inspector Brennan's notice. Meredith tried interrupting. Nathan simply raised one hand. After finishing the last page, he closed the folder and handed it back. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "this is a private road operating under a recorded easement." She stared at him. "You need to make him open it." "I don't have that authority. He can't block residents. He can suspend access for documented safety conditions under the recorded agreement." The color drained from Meredith's face. Around us, conversations stopped almost instantly. People who had spent months believing she controlled everything suddenly realized she didn't even control the road beneath their tires. Then another county vehicle pulled in. Inspector Brennan climbed out carrying a bright orange notice. He walked directly to the bridge entrance and fastened the document to the warning post. Unsafe structure. Restricted access pending repair certification. No speeches. No drama. Just an official seal and a signature. By mid-morning, every scheduled lake house showing had been canceled. The florist loaded her arrangements back into the van. The caterers drove away. One prospective buyer made a U-turn without ever seeing the waterfront homes. As the crowd slowly dispersed, I noticed Meredith standing alone beside her Range Rover, staring at the locked gate as though it had personally betrayed her. She still believed this was the worst part. She had no idea the financial records hidden inside the HOA office were about to do far more damage than any closed gate ever could. Justice didn't arrive with sirens. It arrived in a manila envelope passed quietly across a folding table 3 nights later. The emergency HOA meeting had been moved from the clubhouse to the county community room because too many residents wanted answers. Metal chairs scraped against tile. Rain tapped against the windows. The air smelled like wet coats, stale coffee, and panic disguised as civic order. Meredith sat at the front table with her attorney, posture perfect, face pale beneath expensive makeup. I stood in the back. Ellen Voss stood beside me holding one thin folder. That was all she needed. The first 30 minutes were exactly what I expected. Meredith blamed me. She called the access suspension reckless. She said I had weaponized infrastructure against innocent homeowners. Her attorney used phrases like financial harm and malicious interference until Deputy Brooks quietly reminded everyone that the county had deemed the bridge unsafe. Then a board treasurer named Harold Pike stood up. His hands were shaking. I reviewed the improvement invoices, he said. The room went still. Harold placed copies on the table. Landscaping, stonework, marketing photography, private staging, contractor deposits, all paid through HOA accounts under community beautification. Then Ellen opened her folder. 6 lake houses listed under Meredith's real estate brokerage, all marketed with the same new entrance concept she had tried to force onto my road. The silence that followed had weight. You could hear the fluorescent lights humming overhead. Meredith's mouth opened, but nothing polished came out. Harold kept going. The overloaded truck that damaged my bridge had not been delivering general HOA materials. It had been hauling decorative boulders for the private showcase areas behind Meredith's active listings. My $63,500 repair bill wasn't the scandal. It was the receipt. Within a week, Meredith resigned as HOA president. 2 board members followed. The association's insurer demanded reimbursement records. Homeowners filed a civil complaint. Meredith's brokerage suspended her license pending investigation. And the HOA paid. Not just the repair invoice. They paid engineering fees, legal fees, inspection fees, and the cost of replacing every warning sign she had ordered removed. When the new beams went into Whitaker Bridge, I stood there at sunrise and watched the crew work. Fresh-cut timber filled the cold air. The nail guns cracked like small thunder. Water moved cleanly through the repaired culvert again. For the first time in months, Whitaker Pass sounded right. 2 weeks later, I reopened the gate. No announcement. No speech. Just a new access agreement, new weight sensors, new cameras, and a sign bolted beside the keypad. Private road. Conditional access only. Violations suspend entry. People drove slower after that. Funny how respect shows up once. Consequences have a gate code. Meredith sold her lake house before winter. I saw the moving truck cross Whitaker Bridge one final time. Light enough to pass, slow enough to obey every sign. She didn't look at me as she left. I didn't wave. I just stood beside the road my grandfather carved, the road my father protected, the road I nearly let them bully me into surrendering. The lake was quiet that morning. Mist floated over the water. The repaired bridge held firm beneath the weight of another day. And I finally understood what my father meant. Justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's a locked gate, a recorded deed, and one man patient enough to let the truth carry its own weight.